Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larsen, joined this week by a new friend of mine, Shaun Ritchie. Shaun, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much, Jess. Appreciate being here. This is fun.
So I definitely want to talk about nClouds and everything you guys are doing there with AWS. I want to go back to, I was reading today on Wired and TechCrunch about you guys growing team up to 100 million and selling it to WeWork. I want to talk about that and really everything in between. So let's start for 1 second. What is the premise of nClouds and who's your ideal customer?
Yeah, sure. nClouds, it is a cloud services, cloud engineering services company. We primarily work with AWS. So any company that is standing up databases, servers, infrastructure, architecture, anything in the cloud, we can help that process. Oftentimes our customers come to us because they want to be focused on products and building what is their market differentiator and building their amazing product. And we do all the plumbing and all the electrical work and all that kind of stuff for our customers, right? We're experts there. And so, but it's clearly a services business, which is different than my previous companies, which have all been internet-based businesses and software business, those kinds of things. So services is different than those. Well, and we can talk about that too, but if you want.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure you've got things before this, but let's start with Team. So explain to people what Team was, why it worked, and let's start with one of your big lessons from growing that business.
Well, why it worked, right? We'll have to see. We can define that too. But the last company started it in 2011. 2012 is when we really started to grow the business. But Team was an enterprise software company. We were focused on mostly enterprise, but larger companies, and many of our customers were software companies as well, kind of venture-backed startups also. But it was an office and optimization software that we would maximize office space, we would maximize the utilization and occupancy of that, and really trying to build a new category around workplace experience.
And so can you give some people examples of what that looked like, from the product?
So, we started with a pretty simple iPad app that was a conference room calendar. We would integrate that with a Google, resource calendar or Outlook resource calendar. And then this was actually pretty soon after iPad came out in '09, kind of 2010. We kind of started to innovate on this piece, and some amazing engineers and developers, were helping us to kind of build this thing. My co-founder, though, Zach Holmquist, had this idea to kind of put this just to basically solve meeting conflict, right, in an office. This is now going back a couple of years, and it feels a little bit dated to even talk about it, right? But in when we're in offices, meeting rooms and conference rooms were a high traffic area and kind of a coveted place. And so we were solving that pain for a lot of companies. And, we'd actually put it up onto the App Store basically as an iPad app, and it started getting downloaded by several people, but mainly Silicon Valley startups. And they would contact us and say, hey, we love your product. We want to use it, but we need all these features, and effectively wrote our product roadmap for us. And we didn't really believe it at the time, but we ended up flying out to Silicon Valley, going to a handful of companies. This was Yelp. This was Airbnb's first office, actually, in northern San Francisco. And all these different startups were actually using this product, and it was interesting because it was mostly word of mouth, and not just word of mouth, but somebody would go into somebody's office, they would see the product, they would see this calendar outside the conference room and physically mounted, an iPad mounted outside the conference room. And they said, hey, this is solving a great problem. We ended up building the product roadmap after what our customers were asking us for. And we had 300 customers before we really even had a business. And so it was kind of a fast adoption cycle, but that's how it was being adopted, was because somebody would walk into somebody's office, they would see it, and they would say, hey, I need that. Where did you get that?
So one of my favorite guests out of the last 900 episodes, I've had Steve Blank on the show a couple times, Stanford professor, that the lean
Yeah.
startup that
Yep.
was written about, and he's got his great books, Four Steps to Epiphany, Startup Owner's Manual stuff, and he talked about like so his last company he built to 8 billion and sold it, and he's so intent on this, like genuinely listening to customers, right? And my question for you is, with 300 different people saying, how about this, how about that, what was the decision tree like to decide what you are or not going to put into the product?
It was interesting. So much of the feedback was so consistent. Um, I mean, it was an app, right? It was literally a one-off app, and it actually wasn't a SaaS software, system. And so we had to create the ability to tag multiple office rooms, right, in a building, and then we had to come up with a schematic of room, floor, building, right? Because the bigger companies would have multiple buildings that they were in, and so we even ended up building maps, that would actually show the map of where am I in this physical space, and how do I navigate throughout this space, and how do I get to this meeting room that I see in either my resource calendar or the team app. Where do I find this? And so much of it was so consistent that early on it was actually pretty easy to do that. What was really hard though was once you're kind of growing, once you've got a product, once customers are starting to use this, we were consistent to many SaaS startups. You start with the SMB, and typically it's other startups that you're actually servicing, other businesses like you. And then you end up getting into more of an SMB category, and then you end up growing into more of a mid-market, and then you end up growing into enterprise. Very few companies buck that trend, software companies. There are some, and there are several. This isn't the freemium market like a Box or a Dropbox or even a Spotify or something like that, right? This is more of a B2B SaaS product, and most companies end up starting focused on other startups and then growing into their product, all those enterprise features. And one of the hard things was when we were too early, we were starting to listen to some big customers, and who they weren't actually customers yet. They were big prospects. They were big companies that said, "Hey, we need you to build all these major enterprise features, and then we'll buy your product." And getting sucked into that is so easy. It's difficult to resist that by saying, "No, no, no, I've got to keep with my core, what the market is telling me." And so many times, product leaders or business leaders get confused between what is a customer telling me and what is the market telling me. And
Mm.
it's sometimes hard to distinguish, but it's actually very clearly different. The market is a broad set of companies, and they're typically not your customers yet, right? What a customer tells you, especially when it's a big customer and you start to have fear of saying, well, either they won't buy from me, or the sales team is saying, we're never going to get this big deal. We have to do this. We have to do that in order to land this big customer. You start listening to that too much, you end up building one-offs, and that's really difficult to come back from. And I think most companies have done it. We did it. We had to come back several times. I mean, we had a customer that wanted us to go FedRAMP, right, from the cloud perspective. And that's a major investment. I mean, we do that today at nClouds, and that can be $1 million investment over 18 months. We weren't prepared to do that. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what the actual commitment was. Just to use one example.
Wow. Um, well, let's get further ahead. You know, selling a business for $100 million is a dream for a lot of folks. What's a learning from that you didn't expect?
What's a learning from that I didn't expect? Well, um, probably my biggest learning was what somebody told me, actually, a piece of advice that I got, and this was months after we did the deal, was that the incoming CEO founder of an acquired startup is the biggest threat to the existing leadership team. Pure and simple. And someone told me this after the fact, and I didn't appreciate it even at the time, but it was true, and I see that being true so often. You have somebody coming in with a little bit of swagger or a little bit of money in their pocket or whatever, right? Oh, hey, we got acquired. Many times startup founders are out to change the world, and so if and when they get acquired by a larger company, they want to continue to change the world, right? And sometimes those bigger companies are not excited about changing their world. They like their world. They're happy in their world. They don't need you to come in and change their world, right? They like it. And so that's oftentimes why founders of startups getting acquired, coming into a bigger company like that, even one as rapidly growing and as new and as dynamic as we work, it was the same thing. It was true.
Yeah. I think about it. Sometimes I'm advising other CEOs and they're telling me, especially if they own the whole company, and they're like, things are going so well, but I'm too busy. I don't need to be doing all this work. I should just hire a CEO so I can step back. And I'm like, I'm always challenging them. Like, do you know that book Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, Mark Winters, the US book? Have you heard of that one? Uh,
Mhm.
well, this
Tell me
idea
more.
of the visionary who's got all these crazy
Oh,
ideas, right? I'm like, I don't think you need another visionary. I don't think there's an opening for visionary at your company. I think you need an integrator. I think you need somebody who can execute really hard because you've got plenty of ideas. I think it's actually going to drive you nuts if you hire another visionary who's going to come in and take your company where they want to take it. Like, this is still your baby. Like, if you are selling it and exiting, yes, there will be an opening for visionary. But and it's funny because words matter, right? And so I say, what if instead of like putting out ads for a
yes,
CEO and
this is
and
true.
interviewing, what if
Um,
you like put ads for general
I think,
manager?
yeah, no, no, I think you're right. I mean, you go, Michael Gerber with the E Myth for sure, right? There are different roles and different strengths that people have. And what's so difficult, especially when you're starting a business, right? When you're in a startup, you want to gather other like-minded individuals around you, right? You want to build this really great think tank. You want to anyone who's basically going to latch on to this idea that you have as this founder, this idea generator. You want to latch onto those ideas, and oftentimes you don't actually have the different skill sets in that leadership team or the executive team or something like that to really round out your, you know, all of our blind spots, right? And I've got plenty of blind spots. Everyone has blind spots, but you really need that extra one or two people to help point out where your blind spots are and actually cover for you or cover for you can cover for them when there are not covering but I mean supporting and creating a complementary relationship. um, in the relationships that I've had across different businesses, I've absolutely needed that help, right? In whatever role that I was in, um, to be able to be successful. Because if you have the same person, same mentality, same perspective, it's really difficult to truly be successful.
Yeah. Well, maybe before we move on and talk about some of your other businesses, what's one or two of your core principles that you feel like really made the difference growing team?
Core principles, I mean, I think are focusing on people, right? One of the reasons why we ended up rebranding and renaming our company team was because it was actually about the team. You know, it was about the individuals who were driving, who were building, um, and it's not just about you. It's not just about me. It's about the team, and we really made that an important piece to our business. Um, again, going to branding it that way as well. I think about the same thing at nClouds. It is about the team. I mean, we're a services business, so it's absolutely 100% about the team. Core principle, um, transparency and accountability. Oftentimes we as leaders, sometimes we assume people don't know the hard things and the intricacies about running a business. But your team actually is much smarter than, not smarter, more aware than you probably realize. Um, and oftentimes when it comes to, and this is kind of a pretty, widely known thing is oftentimes the CEO is the last person to know or to realize that, there's a person that is kind of messing up the culture. um, the CEO is oftentimes the last person to know. Everyone else already knows about it. And once it either dawns on or is informed to, or, that the CEO finds out or whatever that is, right? Um, then that person has to go because there's just problems being caused. And then usually the response is, why didn't you do that weeks or months ago, right? And so having that shared accountability, but also transparency in the business, I think is really fundamental to overall success. Not trying to hoard information or silo information, but really it's about passing through information and arming people, not arming people, but providing people with as much information as possible about where we're going and how we're going to get there, and what are the challenges and obstacles for us to get there.
Yeah, I love those. Thanks for sharing that. Well, before we get to nClouds, why don't you tell us about another one of your entrepreneurial ventures and a lesson learned?
Uh, well, first company is an internet marketing company that I started with a different business partner. I guess most business partners are kind of similar across different businesses, but early on, this is our first company. We built this company over a good number of, almost 12 years actually together. And I think what we learned there was when things are challenging and going difficult, it's having a difficult time. Um, we had a couple of different times when we were almost out of business, when we were almost ready to call it quits and we were just done. We weren't successful. We were stuck at just over $1 million in revenue for a long time, and we could not figure out how to scale our business, how to grow it, how to actually have success in the business. And to the point where we didn't know much about venture capital, we didn't know much about like investment, but we were losing money. And we thought one of the hallmarks of losing money was, well, the solution to that is, well, you got to go raise money, right? I mean, we have a money losing business. We got to go raise money. And so not knowing how that really works, and this is a long time ago now, I almost feel silly saying it, but when we were talking to a potential investor and we said, hey, here's the kind of business that we have, it's primarily a services business. And they said, if you're not making money, it's not because you need to go raise money. You're just doing it wrong. Your model is fundamentally incorrect. Your business model, and so we had to better understand what our actual business model was going to be, and then only then could we actually start figuring out the success that we had. And it's I see this happen a lot actually, even today, where there's a lot of founders who have a great idea, a great product idea, a great idea for something that they want to go build. But I always ask, what is the business model around it? How are you going to monetize this? How is it going to turn into a business? Because you can only go so far with a great idea or even a great product, right? I mean, all the social media companies, Instagram, Facebook, right? I mean, they all were built without a business model really attached to it. And then they figured out the business model later. But the vast majority of companies, if you don't understand what the business model is and what it could be, then you're going to have a really hard time growing the business. That was a huge learning that we had to have. And then once we figured out, oh, okay, I'm clear now. I know how this is an actual business. I can understand what the metrics are and the metrics of success for this business, and then we could scale it. Then we can grow it and actually have success in the business. But until we knew that, we were just bouncing around trying to figure some stuff out and actually losing our own money at the time.
Yeah. What was one of the turning points for you to go from losing money to making money there?
The turning point was uh, hours long conversation in a parked car in a parking garage with driving rain all the way around the outside, and we had to have a little heart to heart. We had to say, are we going to do this? Are we going to do this business, or are we not? Because we had a plan that we could have a plan, we could get out of debt, and we could have bring everything down to almost zero, a little bit of functionality, still working in our business, and it would kind of trickle along, and hopefully would pay off our debts, and hopefully we could go do something else. But what we decided was, no, we're going to do this, and we had to get clear on our roles because we were kind of stepping over each other quite a bit. And, as two co-founders sometimes do, we didn't have the roles defined well enough. We had to be accountable, going back to that word, we had to be accountable to each other on what my role was going to be and what his role was going to be. And we were accountable to each other for those things. And we weren't going to step over and try to do the other person's job. We had to stay back. We had to say, look, this is where I'm focused on. Here's how we can complement each other. We defined our roles and we defined our commitment, and commitment to the business together and commitment to each other. And that was a single turning point. And I'm going to have to remember that was in 2005. But anyway, sometimes when you have really intense or difficult or even amazing uh, conversations or making decisions, you remember where you were, what you were doing, what the environment was. That's a very clear one for me. And having made that decision, having made that recommitment to each other and to the business, and figuring out what our roles are going to be, then we could get to work. Then we weren't tripping over each other, and we could actually get to work in the right way. And that was really the turning point around. That all happened at the same time with this investor, right? We were trying to figure some things out too, and that advice we could right around the same time as well. It was a pretty seminal moment. We went from just over 1 million. We went to the next year, went to 3.5. We went to 9.5. We went to 15.5. We went to 20.5. Right over the next couple of years, and Inc. 500, Inc. 500 a couple of times right in there, and it was great. But we had to learn some hard lessons before we could get there.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, let's skip ahead today. Um, Thinking about end clouds, there's obviously people who do some things similar, and cloud has been a buzzword long enough, and you're not, you know, I guess my question there is, what do you think you guys have done special? What's different about end clouds?
So in clouds, I like to think about different kinds of entrepreneurial journeys. Let me just take a step back, and I'll get back right back to your question in just a second. There's different entrepreneurial journeys. I think there's four kind of main types of entrepreneurial journeys. One, and the most common, I believe, is an opportunistic type of journey. It's, hey, I stumbled across this thing. Somebody needs this product or service. I can supply that, or anything like that. Right? There's just an opportunity that comes along, and I just keep pulling on that thread, and I figure some stuff out. And hey, I've got a business. I've got something that works. All of my previous entrepreneurial journeys have been that. I think it's by far, again, the most common. Another journey is one that's a passion project, right? It's, I love this. I could do this for the rest of my life, right? And it's not work. It's just pure enjoyment. And if I can make a business around that, amazing. And there's a lot of examples that we can talk about there. Another one is a more visionary kind of a company. And a visionary company, takes more experience and takes some understanding of what a market may need. But I have an idea, and this, I have this vision, and if I can just build a business, this thing needs to exist, right? And the world is going to be a better place because this thing exists, and it is my goal, and it is my mission to build and create this thing and let the world enjoy it. The last one that I think about is the strategic one. And it's one where These are less common because you have to have a little bit more experience of knowing how to put different pieces of the puzzle together, right? It's people, it's market opportunity, it's white space, right? In Utah, there's a very classic example of Stance socks, right? Jeff Curl kind of built this company and saying, hey, it's not about the socks or even the underwear. It's about a market opportunity, and if I can apply learnings here in this area, and if I can do that here, that's what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls innovation, right? Calls creativity, right? In his book, he was famous for writing the book Flow. When he talks about creativity and innovation, it's actually intersecting multiple planes of knowledge, multiple planes of experience, together, mashing those together, and you've got something new and something creative. Well,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
such an
about
interesting
clouds
one.
in that.
The Jeff
I
Curl
think we have a
story
little
is
bit
so
of delay. I'm
interesting.
sorry.
Coming off of Skull Candy. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it is. It is, right? Because he did that, executed that in the headphones market, but he went into the socks market, right? And applying learnings and expertise in one area in another area, coming out of the same company. Look at Jeremy Andrus, right? Similar kind of a thing. In one area, apply those learnings in a different area, and then you can have success. And it's not all about doing the exact same thing. It's about doing similar things, learning from that kind of experience and applying that to a different area. Well, being very strategic about it, if you can put together, find the right market, find the right, kind of growing opportunity, find the right vehicle to be able to do that with, and then focus on people and culture and all the things that you're really, really good at doing, then you can bring those things together in a market and really win. That's what we're doing with nClouds. That's where the idea has come from nClouds. I wanted to focus on a people oriented business, and what greater opportunity uh, to focus on people than a services company, right? And technology services are a fantastic lever. Sorry, technology is the greatest lever that we have. Focus on technology, focus on the cloud, a huge space. It's no longer emerging, it's massive, but still has so far to go. um, Not enterprise software, right? That was my experience prior to this. Enterprise software, or SaaS software, is an interesting phenomenon. I don't know, it's an interesting beast, I guess. In SaaS, or in most technologies, even consumer, right? There is a winner that is crowned, right? If you look at every single category out there, there is a winner to that category, and there's potentially a second or third, um, kind of runner up, I guess, right? You go back and look at the original kind of cloud software. What is it? CRM, Salesforce. It is a clear winner of the category. It's been 20 plus years. There's HubSpot. And there's a couple of other companies as well, but you get pretty niche pretty quick in such an old market. And when you're looking at having to win the category, it's a win lose, right? It's a kind of, not win lose. It's a zero
You're the
sum game
Coca-Cola or you're
mostly.
not.
Exactly. Oh, you got to sell the Coca-Cola. All right. Um, in services, there's so much opportunity to create an amazing business, um, to achieve all of the objectives that we have and create an amazing culture business, um, doing some amazing things. And if we can craft it the right way, we don't have to be Salesforce. We don't have to be the only company out there that's able to do it. We can get to massive scale. We can get to, achieve all of the growth metrics that we have, and all the people metrics that we have, and all the business metrics that we have. And in this space, I'm a firm believer that we can do it that way. And at this time in my career, that's really where I wanted to focus. I think it actually has worked out from more luck than anything, from market timing. Raising venture is very difficult right now, and if we were focused there, it would be a more of an uphill battle, and much more difficult. But we've been able to put together, a string of acquisitions, so growing inorganically, but also growing organically. But I'm also using a couple of other models that have worked in other industries in the past and applying those to this industry, and we're starting to see some pretty cool success with it too. So
Like, what's
hopefully
an
that kind
example
of
of that?
helps a little bit.
Yeah, what's an example of that adapting models?
So So Ryan Westwood is on our board. He's actually the chairman of our board of directors, and he's a good friend of mine. Been a good friend for a long time. He built a similar model of a company in the Salesforce ecosystem. He built a company called Simplus. Uh, Built that, grew it, sold it, right, in the Salesforce ecosystem. And it was actually interesting story. The week after I left team, after the WeWork acquisition, I went to go see Ryan, and I said, if it wasn't Salesforce, if you were to build another company similar to what you're doing here and not in the Salesforce ecosystem, which one would it be? And he said, cloud. He said AWS. And I said, I love AWS. That's exactly what I want to think about. And then basically 2.5, almost 3 years later, came back around to that. So it seeded that conversation early on. And we're now applying similar principles about how a different category kind of grew and expanded, but it's not the same thing. It's actually quite different because it was a different time. It's a different ecosystem. It's a different way to build a business, and it's
Yeah.
different people
What,
running it. But there are a lot of principles to be applied.
so what's one of those principles and how you adapted it?
Um, One of those principles, how I adapted it. Great question. Um, I think people and structure. I'll give you a different example, actually. Um, an entrepreneur who I look up to, quite a bit. Um, at a previous company, had 9 direct reports, and it was unsustainable for them. And um, in the next company, he said, "Look, I'm only going to have a couple of reports because 9 was unsustainable." I think he said 12. I had 9 at team, and it was unsustainable for me. It was not. I did not do that business the right way. Meaning, my direct reports and who I had to meet with on a regular basis and manage. Different opinions, across the table and stuff like that. I had to manage a lot of that. It took a lot of extra time. And he said the same thing. And so I said, in my next company, I'm going to do something similar to what he did in his next company. I learned from that mistake and have far fewer direct reports. So I did that. He said that he had 2 direct reports, and that was it. I did the same thing. I had 2 direct reports in this business. And what I've had to actually expand that because although although that was great, that was way more sustainable. That was a lot easier to have 2 direct reports, or maybe 3, 2.5, 3, direct reports rather than 9 or even 12. That was actually too few, and I wasn't able to get into the business quickly enough to really understand how so many different things worked. And I was taking a step back and kind of not getting quite as involved. So I actually had to change that. Actually had to get into the business much more to really understand the business. And this has now been out just a year and a half ago now. Now I understand this business and how this works, and a lot of the intricacies about it. Um, so trying to apply the learnings from another entrepreneur from a presentation he gave back in 2017, I'm trying to adapt it for today's environment and my specific environment, and it didn't really work. And what's interesting is that over time, he actually did the exact same thing. He actually expanded it, and I don't know how many direct reports that he has now, but he's got several more than 2. And so we've learned the same thing over. But I took that as a single point in time, as a this is a hard and fast rule, right? And I lodged that, and I said I am gonna do exactly that. And so when I did exactly that, it didn't really work for me. And so that's a learning that I've had to do is sure take advice, but you've got to apply that to your circumstance, to my circumstance, and in the right ecosystem, the right time, and all that kind of stuff.
So how many do you have now?
5,
Yeah.
which is better than 2, and it's better than 9. So 5. It
That's
seems to be
great.
the right one, for me today.
Yeah. Um, well, I'd be interested to know, there's so many great entrepreneurs. I mean, at the event we met at, there was a bunch of great entrepreneurs, right? And there's so few statistically that have accomplished what you've accomplished. What do you think is different about you? Why do you think you've been able to accomplish what so many others haven't?
I don't know if there's anything different about me. I think I think
Or what do you think
I
you
was
do differently?
fortunate to surround. Well, I was fortunate to surround myself with really amazing people, and I learned a lesson as well that there's this is now being taught more in school. I didn't learn this in school, but um, in the 1940s, Joseph Campbell, kind of created this I don't know, kind of framework around the hero's journey, right? We hear some about this, the hero's journey, and oftentimes we apply the hero's journey to us, to ourselves, and say we're the hero, right? We are gonna do this thing. We're an entrepreneur. We're a founder, or CEO, or something like that, and we're gonna take this and we're gonna go through the whole journey, and I'm the hero. Well, what I had to learn was that it's not about me, and I'm not the hero. The actual heroes of any business, of any successful venture, are the customers. The customers are the heroes, and they are the ones that actually support through revenue, through product advice, through advocacy, through all that stuff. It's the customers that are the absolute most important element to any business. If the customers are behind you, there can be challenges in your leadership team and management team, and you can have all sorts of, you know, um, challenges or issues in the business. But if you have customers and if they're advocating for you, and if they change jobs and they take your product into their next job, right? If it's a B2B, or if it's a consumer, play, like, they stay with you. They want to believe what you believe, right? They want to be with you because they like what you're offering them. Of course, I mean, everyone's self-interested, right, in that capacity. But if they are excited to be with you along for that journey, right, they will be the ones supporting you. That's the biggest kind of learning that I've had to do. Is it's all about the customer, um, because they support the business. So I don't know if that's a good, great answer to your question, but really focusing on customer, maybe from a different angle. That's it. There's also a lot of luck
Yeah, I
too.
really appreciate that. Yeah. No, but I appreciate that. I think that you are right. I think that so much of our staff and our investors and the business press lead us to think about ourselves as the hero in that story, and maybe we are in our own story. But this idea of like that we are not the hero in the business's story, that the customer is, like, we're the Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? We're not the Luke Skywalker, you know? This idea of like how can we make sure it works for them, not how can they make sure it works for us. I know it's just semantics, but like that, just as you were saying it, like it gave me a completely different feeling.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Being the Obi-Wan Kenobi, being the mentor, right? Being the mentor to the business and to the customer, like that's powerful. Um, because let them be Luke Skywalker. Let them, have the glory, right? For bringing in the product, or adopting that thing, or looking really cool to their friends that they're the first ones to download the app or whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
that's where the focus needs to be.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like last weekend. So my daughter's a part of the girls wrestling team at her high school, and her coach is actually an Olympic hopeful, and like her coach is absolutely the hero in her own journey in her going to the Olympics. But they just went to this big meet with 100 other schools, and for most of the tournament they were in first place, and they ended up in fifth place in the end. When they, like, going into it, they didn't even think they were going to place. Like they didn't think they were at that level, and but like that coach, she's kind of a big deal in women's wrestling, and certainly locally she is. But she's there to make all my daughter's friends win, not herself win. She's the coach. She's not the wrestler, right? And I think it's like you have to have a certain amount of self belief and ambition and stuff to look statistics in the face and start a business anyways, right? And so I think there's so many temptations to think that we are the Luke Skywalker. At least there is for me. So I appreciate you framing it that way.
There's talking about kids. There's a children's book, and it's relatively new, and it's called "What Do You Do with an Idea." I don't know who wrote it, but it's a great children's book. It's kind of about entrepreneurship maybe, but it's what do you do with an idea? And the whole book talks about I have this idea and I'm nervous with it. I'm scared to let it out, but I want to nurture it. I want to keep it safe, but I also want to let it blossom, let it go. And I like the analogy a lot because as soon as this child lets the idea go, it starts to become something. It starts to become its own thing. And even though the child, birthed or created the idea, you get the idea out there and then it becomes something. And I mean, we all know this, right? Ideas are far more powerful than armies and anything, right? But if you have an idea and you nurture the idea, become the coach, become the mentor, become the Obi-Wan Kenobi of that idea, right? Even if you don't have extensive experience yourself or whatever, but you can do that to an idea. And then the idea is what is the powerful thing, and that the idea is what's going to attract other people, and that's what's going to help it live. If I go back to several examples. If it's about the person themselves, sometimes usually it ends up failing, but it's about the idea of what the concept is for the business or the product. That's what the most important, or that's what the most powerful thing is.
Oh, so interesting. Well, listen, if people want to check out nClouds, if they want to connect with you personally, if they want to follow you online, where are the best places online?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn. Shaun Ritchie. I'm not a huge X or Twitter person there, but that's probably the best way. Or Sean at nClouds. It's pretty easy. So connect up with me there.
So I'm interested in your choice there because I'm a total LinkedIn guy and kind of non-existent elsewhere besides the show.
Yeah.
Why is LinkedIn the weapon of choice for you?
So Twitter's X is great. There's a lot of information out there. There's so much negativity on that platform. There's so much of the anonymity. There's literally so much negativity, and so you can put great stuff there. You can put great content, but there's so much negativity that I have a hard time with it. And LinkedIn, I feel like because there's not an anonymity, because it is individual people. Sure, you can disagree. There's some great disagreement and healthy disagreement on the LinkedIn platform, but because there's not trolls on there, there's not bots, there's not all this other kind of stuff. The vast majority of it is people building each other and shouting out each other, calling out, certain, they can advocate for certain things. But it's all kind of in the name of like building the network, building businesses, building careers, building organizations. And we can act as support members to everybody's hero, right? Um, I love that concept, right? And that's why I like to support it, and that's why I'm involved more there.
Yeah, I do feel like so I haven't thought about it in those terms, but I do feel like because my YouTube channel for these episodes, right? Like every once in a while I get negativity about me, but like regularly I get like harsh negativity about a guest. And some of it's like so silly. Like I had this guy who's a 20-year CIA officer who's got out against, some of the biggest enemies of America. And like some anonymous person puts like, yeah, right, that guy couldn't convince me to walk across the street. It's just like such a silly comment of no value and obviously has a lot more to say about the person writing it than, the guy who played at the highest game of the intelligence world globally, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I never get comments like that on my LinkedIn. When we put stuff out on the LinkedIn, it's almost like, your mom's thing of like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I feel like
uh-huh.
that is so much more common on LinkedIn, and I actually really agree with your assessment.
Yeah, I mean it's true. Uh, you know, when you're anonymous, it's so easy to be, to tear others down. It's so easy. When it's not anonymous, it's a lot more difficult. You have to stand behind it. It's a lot more difficult to do that. So yeah, it's pretty easy for me where I want to spend my time. Or if
I
I'm
also
spending
feel
time
like
online, like that's where I should be.
I also feel like it's a little bit like secondary email for business people. Like friends sell companies or switch jobs, and their email doesn't work anymore, but their LinkedIn does.
Always. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, as we close off here, what do you want to leave people with today?
So it's about building, right? It's about creating. Um, I think that's one of the things that we're here to do, right? We have this ability to create, and the more creation that we can do, and many of us in your audience and in in business, we create through business, right? We create businesses. That's what we do, but we're creating value in doing that. There's a lot of people who create, in artistic ways and in musical ways or all kinds of other ways, right? Awesome. Like we need more of that too. But my talents and my skill set, and I think many of our audience here, um, it's about creation through creating value, right, for other people. Um, so anyway, I guess if I were to leave anything with, it would be that. Like, what what am I creating? What are you creating today? What kind of value are you building and creating? And that I think that's a legacy. I mean, this is the legacy of every artist, of every music artist, of every painter. Like what did you create? That's your legacy, and that's cool to think about.
It's interesting to say that statement in terms of a services company because, sometimes when people say create value, it can come across as a buzzword to me. But as you were saying it just now, I thought about, you know, when someone is a great service provider and they're helping another organization like come up with a better concept, organize resources, add expertise, add resources, and you put all those parts together, it's like, I got a lot of ingredients in my fridge. They're a lot more valuable put together and cooked, you know, and but you sometimes you need a chef, right, or a cook, or someone who's teaching the chef, you know, and it is literal value that now exists that didn't before, that you didn't just take from someone else. Like it's not like you stole someone else's groceries to make this meal. You just combine them in a way that's much more desirable, right? And and you think about like excellence in services, there really is that chef type thing where the way they recombined, knowing what not to do, like it's literal creation of value that did not exist, right?
Yeah, I actually, I love that. I love that description. I love that analogy. I want to use that if I can. But you're absolutely right. I look so oftentimes in well, what we did, right? In a SaaS company, you have created a product, absolutely, and it's valuable, right? But you have to convince everyone that this is the unit of value that is worthwhile for you, right? You have to sell that, and you have to sell what the outcome is, and yes, all those kind of things. But really, it's off the shelf. I mean, it is what it is. It's not really going to change. Sure, there can be features you can toggle on and off, but in services, you're absolutely right, right? We can go to the heart of what the pain is, of what the situation is, or even if they didn't know, like we can create that. We can be the chef, we can be the advisor, we can be the Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? We can be that and say, hey, I can either do it for you, or here's how you can do it, right? And directly provide that value. And so, I mean, if we can be helpful, that's what we want to be. We want to be helpful as a service provider. So you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
I love that way to think about it, Jess.
yeah. Well, I love it. Well, thanks for doing this. I think we need to give a shout out to Adrian Dayton, who got us introduced. I love Adrian, and I appreciate you making the time for this.
Another great creator. Thanks,
Right?
Jess. Appreciate the time, and it was
Okay.
great to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everyone.